The television flickered to life, and there she was, a slight teenager with dark eyes and a smile that seemed to speak directly to the audience at home. Mella Astrella was not a singer, not a guest star, but something even more captivating. A girl from South Philadelphia whose quiet grace turned a crowded dance floor into something unforgettable. Viewers recognized her because she looked like someone they might know from their own neighborhood, yet on American Bandstand, she carried herself with poise beyond her years. Born in 1947, Carmella entered the show at just 13, still a student at Southern High, balancing schoolwork with the thrill of national television. She moved not with the intention of being noticed, but simply for the joy of music, and that sincerity translated through the screen. To her friends, she was Mella, trustworthy and loyal. To viewers, she became a symbol of what Bandstand promised, that ordinary teenagers could become part of America's living memory. Stay with us as we journey through her story. And if these memories bring you back, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another tribute to the faces who defined Bandstand. Carmella Julia Astrella grew up in South Philadelphia, a neighborhood where family bonds and tradition shaped the rhythm of everyday life. Born on July 10, 1947, she was raised by her mother, Lillian, alongside her younger sister, Linda. At just 13, Carmella suffered the devastating loss of her father in a car accident, a tragedy that left a deep mark on her youth. Yet even in the face of grief, she carried herself with quiet strength. Friends would later remember that she managed to balance sadness with a warm, trustworthy presence that drew others toward her. At Southern High School, Carmella was known not for seeking attention, but for the values she lived by: honesty, loyalty, and sincerity. She was thoughtful in the way she approached people, believing that first impressions rarely told the whole story. This patience in judgment earned her a reputation for kindness and dependability. Among her closest companions were fellow dancers like Bruce Kaplan, Lou Galasso, and Byron Robinson, who valued her as a steady and genuine friend. Life at home reflected the simplicity and discipline of her upbringing. Evenings often meant homework at the kitchen table, long phone calls with classmates, and carefully written replies to the growing stack of letters from admirers who had begun to notice her on television. Weekends provided the only chance for her to go out on dates, as her mother kept a close watch over her schedule. Carmella accepted these limits without protest, focusing instead on her studies and preparing for the future she envisioned: steady work as a secretary, a career that promised stability and independence. Fan magazines captured small details that gave readers a glimpse into her personality. She adored the music of Mary Wells and Johnny Mathis, admired the glamour of Sophia Loren and George Chakiris on the big screen, and rarely missed an episode of Dr. Kildare on television. Italian food was her comfort, black her favorite color, and her taste in culture reflected the broader youth trends of the early 1960s. What made these details compelling was not their uniqueness, but the way they showed how ordinary she remained, even as her image was broadcast into millions of homes. For Carmella, family and friendship were the anchors that steadied her in a world that was suddenly widening. South Philadelphia gave her roots, but it was her own resilience that allowed her to grow beyond its streets. Those who knew her best called her Mella, a nickname that captured her warmth and familiarity. Long before she became a recognizable face on American Bandstand, she had already built the character that would make her stand out, quietly, sincerely, and without pretense. In the early 1960s, American Bandstand was more than just a television show. It was a cultural gateway. Teenagers lined up outside the Philadelphia studio at 46th and Market, hoping to be chosen for the floor. For Carmella Astrella, that chance came at only 13, a Southern High student still juggling homework and household chores. She joined the crowd of hopefuls, the sound of music spilling through the glass doors, and soon stepped into a world where her life would change forever. Her first appearance in 1961 was not marked by flashiness or bold gestures. Carmella's appeal was subtler. She carried herself with calm confidence, smiling naturally and moving with an ease that viewers immediately connected to. On screen, she looked like any other South Philadelphia teenager, but she stood out precisely because of that. In a program filled with lively personalities, her sincerity felt refreshing. She wasn't trying to perform, she was simply dancing. As the months passed, Carmella became one of the familiar faces on Bandstand. Paired often with Steve Lewis, she developed a partnership that would be remembered decades later in photographs and fan recollections. Off-camera, she remained close to Bruce Kaplan, Lou Galasso, and Byron Robinson, friends who provided stability in the sudden swirl of national exposure. Together, they navigated the odd duality of teenage life: classrooms and homework in the morning, television cameras in the afternoon. Fan magazines soon took notice. They printed her favorite foods and songs, shared stories about her school life, and even published her nickname Mella, inviting readers to see her as both ordinary and extraordinary. Letters poured in from across the country. Carmella responded to as many as she could, often spending evenings at the kitchen table with envelopes spread in front of her. This personal touch deepened her connection to the audience, who felt they were not just watching a dancer on TV, but corresponding with a friend. For Carmella herself, Bandstand was less about recognition and more about belonging. It gave her a space where the grief of losing her father could momentarily fade, replaced by music and laughter among peers who shared the same dreams. Dancing became both an escape and a form of healing. Each time she stepped onto the floor, she wasn't chasing stardom, she was simply embracing the moment. By the time 1963 arrived, Carmella had become part of the visual language of Bandstand. Viewers at home recognized her as one of the constants in the shifting mix of dancers. She never claimed the spotlight, but her quiet grace lingered. In a show designed to reflect the pulse of American youth, she embodied its heart, unpretentious, sincere, and deeply human. By 1962, Carmella Astrella had become one of the familiar faces that loyal viewers of American Bandstand expected to see whenever they tuned in after school. The girl who had walked through the studio doors shyly at 13 was now a steady presence on the dance floor, radiating a natural charm that caught the camera even when she wasn't looking for it. What made Carmella so captivating was not spectacle, but subtlety. She never pushed herself into the spotlight, yet she always seemed to belong exactly where the music was. The magic of television amplified her presence. Across the country, teenagers recognized the petite girl with dark hair and warm eyes, and magazines quickly began to feature her. Fan profiles introduced readers to her tastes and routines: her love for Mary Wells and Johnny Mathis, admiration for Sophia Loren and George Chakiris, and evenings filled with homework and long phone calls before answering stacks of letters. These details didn't make her extraordinary. Rather, they made her relatable. She was a bandstand dancer who looked and lived like the very audience watching her. The show itself magnified these connections. On the dance floor, Carmella was often seen alongside Steve Lewis, a partner whose style complemented her own. Together, they moved with an ease that resonated with viewers. Photographs of the two, sometimes mid-step, sometimes sharing a smile, became lasting images, preserved in scrapbooks and fan collections long after the music stopped. Other snapshots placed her with Pat Carpino or Richie Cartledge, proof of the friendships that defined the Bandstand family. The height of Carmella's time on the show coincided with a cultural moment when television was reshaping how teenagers saw themselves. Bandstand wasn't just entertainment, it was identity. Young viewers measured their fashion, their music, and even their sense of belonging against the faces they saw daily. In Carmella, they saw someone both glamorous and approachable, someone who represented possibility without pretense. Her steady smile told them that an ordinary South Philadelphia teenager could become part of something that reached the entire nation. What set her apart during this peak was her balance of humility and confidence. She did not try to outshine others, but she also never shrank when the camera turned her way. That poise gave her an authenticity viewers trusted. In a time when celebrity often seemed manufactured, Carmella offered the opposite: a genuine presence, a girl who was still focused on school, family, and the simple joys of music. Her 2 years at the forefront of the program were brief in the span of a lifetime, yet they left an indelible mark. Fans remembered her not for dramatic moments or controversies, but for the way she made the show feel more like real life. She represented the bandstand ideal, that any teenager, simply by being themselves, could become part of a larger cultural memory. For Carmella, the height of the spotlight was not about chasing fame, but about embracing the joy of the dance floor. And in that joy, she became unforgettable. On American Bandstand, dancing was more than movement. It was conversation without words. The chemistry between partners often defined how the audience remembered them, And for Carmella Astrella, that connection was most visible in her dances with Steve Lewis. Together, they formed one of the floor's most graceful pairings. Carmella's calm elegance balanced Steve's assured style, and the harmony between them drew both the camera's eye and the admiration of viewers. Their partnership became a small but enduring symbol of the bandstand years, later preserved in photographs that fans would treasure for decades. Those images, some showing Carmella and Steve mid-step, others capturing candid laughter with friends like Pat Carpino and Richie Cartledge, reveal the real story of Bandstand. Teenagers sharing joy and building friendships as the nation watched. For Carmella, these bonds mattered as much as the television exposure. She was never interested in standing apart, she was interested in belonging. Her circle, including Bruce Kaplan, Lou Galasso, and Byron Robinson, remained steady companions who kept her grounded in the middle of a whirlwind few outsiders could fully understand. Behind the camera, life was less glamorous than it appeared on television. Teenagers crowded into Studio B, hoping to be chosen for the limited spots on the floor. Once inside, the energy was relentless, songs played back to back, and the expectation to keep dancing never let up. Carmella's reputation was that of reliability. She wasn't dramatic or competitive, but she was consistent, someone others trusted to hold her own under the pressure of bright lights and constant attention. Fan magazines played a role in amplifying the dancers' reputations. Readers wanted to know everything, from favorite foods to after-school routines, and Carmella's sincerity shone through these pages. She never projected a glamorous persona. Instead, she came across as genuine, approachable, and thoughtful. Letters addressed to Mella poured in from around the country, and she answered as many as she could, often in the quiet of her family's South Philadelphia kitchen. It was there, away from the cameras, that she revealed the same loyalty and patience that her friends on the floor admired. These connections were not limited to admirers. Within the bandstand community, trust and friendship were survival tools. The dancers understood that while television made them recognizable, it also placed them under scrutiny. Carmella valued sincerity above all else. She believed people showed their true character not immediately, but over time, a perspective that helped her form bonds that lasted long after the show ended. As her time on Bandstand progressed, Carmella's image as part of a memorable partnership with Steve Lewis became central to how fans remembered her. Decades later, when those photographs resurfaced online, they reignited the emotions of an era. For those who had watched her in the early 1960s, seeing her again, even in still images, brought back the excitement of rushing home after school, turning on the television, and recognizing a familiar face in the crowd. Behind the scenes, Carmella was still the girl from South Philadelphia, a devoted student, a supportive friend, and a teenager who found in music both joy and belonging. Her partnerships on the floor reflected more than skill, they reflected who she was. Authentic, steady, and kind, she turned the dance floor into a place where sincerity mattered as much as the steps. Every regular eventually reached the point where the bandstand lights faded and everyday life returned. For Carmella Astrella, that turning point came in 1963. She had joined the show at 13, and after 2 years of appearances, quietly stepped away. There was no dramatic farewell, no headline in a fan magazine announcing her departure. Like many of her peers, she simply drifted back into the ordinary rhythm of school and home, leaving behind a legacy of smiles and graceful steps preserved in memory and photographs. The decision reflected both practicality and maturity. At Southern High, Carmella was still just a teenager balancing homework and family obligations. She had ambitions of one day working as a secretary, a steady and respectable path for young women of her generation. Television exposure, however exciting, could not replace the importance of finishing school and planning for the future. For Carmella, Bandstand was never about chasing celebrity. It had been an experience, a gift, and a way to cope with grief after losing her father. Now it was time to move forward. This transition was not without a sense of loss. For 2 years, the studio had offered her a sanctuary, a space where music drowned out sorrow and friendships felt unbreakable. Walking away meant leaving behind not only the cameras, but also the unique community that had defined her early teenage years. Yet Carmella carried with her the resilience that had guided her since childhood. She understood that memories could remain even after the moment itself had passed. Life beyond Bandstand was quieter, but no less meaningful. Carmella focused on family, eventually becoming a mother to 3 daughters and later a grandmother. Her home in Marlton, New Jersey became her center, far removed from the spotlight yet filled with love. Friends remembered her as private and grounded, someone who kept the essence of her teenage self even as she built a life defined by loyalty and devotion. Decades later, Carmella reconnected with her bandstand roots in a new way. She became an administrator for a Facebook group dedicated to the Philadelphia years, helping to preserve thousands of photographs and memories. For many fans, it was a revelation to find that one of the very dancers they had admired as teenagers was now helping to curate their shared history. Her role was not about recognition, it was about community, the same value that had guided her on the dance floor years earlier. But even in this renewed chapter, life dealt her another quiet test. Few people knew that Carmella was battling cancer. She chose to keep her illness private, revealing little even to close friends. When she passed in March 2016, it came as a shock to many. One day, she was still present in the group, preserving memories. The next, she was gone. The suddenness of her passing reflected the quiet dignity with which she lived, never drawing attention to herself, never asking for pity, but always giving what she could. Her turning points, both in youth and later life, were not endings, but transformations. From bandstand regular to devoted mother, from private citizen to online community builder, Carmella showed that a legacy can evolve without ever seeking the spotlight. In every phase, she remained true to herself, authentic, sincere, and quietly strong. When the television cameras no longer followed her, Carmella Astrella embraced the quieter rhythms of adulthood. What had once been afternoons spent under studio lights became days devoted to family and home. She built her life in Marlton, New Jersey, raising 3 daughters and later welcoming grandchildren, roles she carried with the same devotion and steadiness that had defined her as a teenager. Friends and family recalled her as deeply private, but also as someone whose loyalty never wavered. She gave her best to those closest to her, and in return, she was loved with equal strength. The legacy of Bandstand, however, was never far away. For Carmella, those years were not simply a chapter of her youth, they were part of her identity. Decades after leaving the show, she reconnected with her past by helping to administer an online community dedicated to the Philadelphia years of American Bandstand. At a time when nostalgia was flourishing on the internet, Carmella's presence lent authenticity. She wasn't just another fan preserving history, she had lived it. Her guidance helped the group grow from a few hundred photographs and members into a vast archive of nearly 19,000. In this role, Carmella once again displayed the qualities that had made her memorable on television. She wasn't the loudest or most dominant voice, but she was steady, fair, and focused on what mattered most, celebrating the regulars and the memories of an era that had shaped so many lives. She was careful to keep the group free from the noise of advertising or self-promotion, reminding members that its purpose was to honor the kids who had danced in Studio B and the music that had defined their youth. Her ability to nurture community across decades underscored something essential about her character. On Bandstand, she had embodied the spirit of sincerity. Online, she carried that same spirit into the digital age. Fans who interacted with her in the group often remarked how surreal it felt to see Mella, the teenager they once admired on their television screens, now responding to posts or sharing photographs. It was as though the line between past and present had blurred, and Carmella was once again dancing in their living rooms. Yet behind this contribution, Carmella faced a personal battle few knew about. She had been diagnosed with cancer, but she chose to keep the illness private. Even in her final years, she preferred to focus on the joy of memory rather than the shadow of illness. When she passed in March 2016, it came as a shock to many. The suddenness of her absence left fans and friends alike grappling with grief, remembering her not only as a teenager on Bandstand, but as the woman who had quietly safeguarded its history. Her later years proved that legacy is not only built in moments of public visibility. It is also shaped in the quiet, consistent work of preserving memory, of building family, of showing loyalty to both past and present. Carmella Astrella may have stepped away from the spotlight in her youth, but in adulthood, she created a legacy just as powerful. Through her children, her grandchildren, and the thriving community she helped sustain, she ensured that the story of the bandstand years and her place within them would not fade. The legacy of Carmella Julia Astrella is not measured by headlines or by fame, but by the quiet, enduring ways she touched those around her. On American Bandstand, she represented the best of what the program offered, a reminder that ordinary teenagers with sincerity and joy could become part of a nation's collective memory. Her time on the floor, from 1961 to 1963, left behind an image of grace and authenticity that has outlasted the decades. But her life beyond the studio carried equal importance. She became a devoted mother and grandmother, built a home centered on loyalty and love, and later helped preserve bandstand history for thousands of fans online. Even in her final years, facing illness with remarkable dignity, she chose to focus on giving rather than receiving, on celebrating life rather than dwelling on its struggles. Today, when fans look back on the Philly years, Carmella's smile remains a touchstone, seen in photographs, remembered in anecdotes, and felt in the community she helped sustain. She embodied the spirit of bandstand, not only when she danced before the cameras, but also when she quietly built bridges between past and present. Her story invites us to reflect on the power of memory, how a single teenager's presence could echo through generations, reminding us of a time when music, friendship, and authenticity defined youth. If these memories resonate with you, make sure to subscribe and join us as we continue honoring the faces and stories that made American Bandstand unforgettable.